As we continue to learn about cells, it is important for us to recognize that there is incredible cell diversity amongst all of the different cell types. The structure in a cell reflects the differences in the cell's function. So, for example, the shape of a cell is directly connected to the function the cell must work through. The perfect example of this is in the comparison of a nerve cell and a red blood cell. So a nerve cell, you can see, has all of these spindly arms, which we'll talk more about when we get to the brain. But its prime function is to send and receive electrical signals. So it has these long arms for the connection and the sending of signals. Red blood cells need to be able to move through our veins and are small and circular, and its structure, its circular size, makes it perfect for its function to travel through the veins. It's also important to note that some cells will not contain all of the organelles that we are talking about when we learn about potential cell organelles. For example, in a plant cell, the root cells do not have chloroplasts because they are located under the ground and there's no need for them to contain that organelle. Now let's take a closer look at some of the other plant organelles that we've not yet spoken about. This is a plant cell here, and as we've talked about, they have a nucleus, and the nucleus directs all of the cell's activities, including reproduction. It's located here. We've talked about the cell wall, and we know that in a plant cell, it's the stiff wall that surrounds the cell membrane, and it gives it a rigid box-like shape, so we can see the cell wall here. We've talked very briefly about ribosomes and a little bit about the cytoplasm, but specifically, let's talk about the endoplasmic reticulum. You can see here that this is the endoplasmic reticulum, and this is a network of passageways that carries materials from one part of the cell to another. Some other parts that a plant cell may have include the chloroplasts. These are the chloroplasts, and they are organelles that capture energy from sunlight and use it to produce food for the cell. You also see this very large organelle, and this is a vacuole. The vacuole is found in most mature plant cells, and they just find one large vacuole. And this is a sac that is within the cytoplasm where water, food, waste products, and other materials are stored. You'll also find the mitochondria that we've talked about as well, which is right there, as well as the Golgi body, which is here. And we'll discuss this a little bit later. So now you can see that we're looking at a different kind of cell. This is an animal cell. And an animal cell, you can see, has something very different immediately than a plant cell. It does not have a cell wall. It does, however, have this outer covering, which, in addition to the cytoskeleton, is the cell membrane, which we've discussed. You can see here these small little dots. These are the ribosomes, and the ribosomes are kind of like factories that produce proteins. They can be attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, or they may be found floating in the cytoplasm. Speaking of the cytoplasm, that simply is referring to all of the fluids that are inside of a cell where organelles are found. The mitochondria, which we've discussed, is the cell's energy production factory. So within the mitochondria, and you can notice in this example there's more than one, this is where most of the cell's energy is produced. You can see here the endoplasmic reticulum, again, is located in the same general area around the nucleus, which we know is the director of the cell's activities, including reproduction. The Golgi body, which plant cells also have, is located here, and the Golgi body receives materials from the endoplasmic reticulum and sends them to other parts of the cell. They also may release materials outside of the cell. We can again see the cell membrane, and we can think of that like the screen door, the screen window. It helps regulate the substances that can enter and leave the cell. In the animal cell, which is different than in the plant cell, you can see the vacuole. Now, the vacuole in the animal cell is a lot smaller. Some animal cells will have vacuoles that store food, water, waste, and other materials, but not all animal cells will. You also see something that's a little bit different than in a plant cell. These are called lysosomes, and these are small organelles that contain chemicals that break down food particles and worn out cell parts.